use the concept and how not to use how to use the concepts in a balanced way, and so then accordingly a method is required. And as I said last time, the aim of our meditation, or the benefit of our meditation, is so that from both the extremes, whether whether we are too consumed by overload of organization or not, that we somehow find a way. Of course, the word is the word that often comes to mind is balance, but it's not to say to manage both the things, but to find a way that we don't cling onto both of those ideas, and yet at the same time we find a way to let go of things. And so therefore the purpose of our meditation is just that. The meditation that I'm referring to, of course, is none other than the idea of samadhi, meaning that probably the translation of the word samadhi is that to have a complete transformation, to have a complete understanding. Not to say in terms of numbers, names, labels, which I suppose comes into the process of learning, but nevertheless, in the ultimate sense, complete in terms of the one thing that we are constantly sort of obscured, which is how to identify me, one could say. That's it. It's a very useful idea, of course. It's a very useful tool to have, the idea of self, me or I. But if it is just almost slightly misused, slightly abused, then right there and then all of the confusions come from there. So therefore, the purpose of meditation, I think, is that through the ritual or through the method, that somehow we it's almost like sort of forgetting, one could say, forgetting the idea of oneself. But at the same time, the funny thing is that trying to forget it, almost, if possible, consciously. I don't know if anyone will sort of succeed, or if anyone has actually succeeded in that. The number of so-called numbers of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that we can name or that we can recall, have they actually been able to do that? Of course, no one can say. But it's a very interesting idea. It's a very interesting challenge that we can perform right here, right now, to see if you can do it consciously. Of course, the cheat sheet, of course, that's there is that we cannot. But it's an attempt that we can, that it's worthwhile for us to embark on, because probably it's the most exciting thing to do. We have embarked on all sorts of challenges so far. Maybe there are a few more left, but nevertheless, no matter how much we try, probably this is the most interesting thing to embark on. To see if you can consciously sort of forget the idea of self. Because the cheat sheet is that the forgetting of the self actually happens in English the word is naturally or automatically, and that's why I think and so this can happen, or most of the time this can happen when we are sort of caught off guard, sort of thing. I'm sure you have heard of this a lot, but nevertheless I'm just basically repeating the same old thing. That's why I think the idea of dukkha or anxiety, or in nervous language, suffering, is mentioned in terms of the first noble truth, first of the Four Noble Truths, because once a society is formed, obviously we see the obvious stages of that life as probably not interesting, and so therefore the moment the idea of or the experience of birth becomes confusing, then we label that as suffering. Similarly aging, similarly falling into illness and dying and so on. So obviously, of course, no one can really say that this is absolute suffering or this is absolute anxiety. However, there is degree or process, one could say, that somehow looks or that is seemingly painful, and we have somehow no way of naming that, no way of pointing a finger at it, and so therefore we just sort of out of rough estimation we name that as undesirable, as dukkha, or as suffering, or whatever we call it. In the aim or search, or let's say in the aspiration, one could say, of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is that actually these stages, or the so-called the first set of truth, is not exactly or not necessarily how we generally agree to label, because although they seem like that, nevertheless they have somehow probably hidden behind a potency, one could say, that can help us, give us that much needed surprise. It's like saying we need a villain. In a dualistic point of view, we always need the opposite to somehow help us surprise. So therefore we have a very prominent, almost an individual who helps us surprise. Yes. Although of course that is a perfectly valid, useful, and a very direct approach, one could say, to relate to reality, but nevertheless, to the majority, it's meaning ourselves, it's a little bit difficult to digest, to think of an actual villain. Because obviously we know what are the, how to say, repercussions of actually forcing ourselves to believe that there is someone out there truly existing villain, particularly as a living, breathing individual. And so therefore, to make it more digestible, to make it more easy, not to say that the actual image, the actual truth is very, very dark, but to actually put it in a very sort of organic way so that we can digest it, we can appreciate it, we can actually utilize it. It is put forth in a way called the truth of suffering, not as a person, but as basically the idea of change itself. And so therefore, these stages of life are put forth not necessarily as a villain, but if you feel comfortable to take them as a villain, we can do it. And we can make a story out of it, a dramatic story out of it. We can make a how to say, a play out of it. And so, from that play, what we get is those most commonly agreed stages of life. And they have the ability and the potency to help us surprise ourselves, shock ourselves, to come out of our thinking. Yeah. Because beyond those, of course, there are many surprise treatment or shock treatments that exist, but somehow we are either too immune to it or too used to it, and so therefore we can just sort of let them go. And they're not medicinal in a way. But these classical treatments, shock treatments, they are very important, because no matter how tough we think we are, or how tough we think we are, or how experienced we think we are, or how accomplished we think we are, in terms of success. Let's say we have become the most successful individuals in our era, or we have become the most spiritual individuals in our era, or we have become the most sort of careless individuals in our era. That these sort of classical stages of life or process of life without any kind of malevolence or ill intent. They just happen, and they come when they happen, or when they take part in a sort of a very feels like it also almost is forceful, but of course it's not. It's very gentle actually. And so the purpose of our meditation is to somehow, if possible, consciously, as I said, of course, probably no one has ever done it, but we can try it. The reason why we are sitting in the meditation posture and so on is to somehow help us believe that we can do it consciously. Maybe we can, but no one in those who are interested in history, no one in history has ever been recorded to have been able to do it consciously. Of course, we like to believe that the historical Buddhas, however many they may have been, that they were able to do it consciously. And based on that idea, we follow the philosophical and academic studies and meditations and so on. But that is a bit of a make-believe, you know. If it helps us, great. But it's just, as I said last time, a skillful means. It is a way to help us encourage. We always need someone impressive figure to do something out of the ordinary and to help us make believe. It helps us, but is that it? Of course not. That is not to say that we are all. The reason is because we are all too ordinary and we are all too mundane. But it's a good news. It's a good news because then that news is able to help us transform the feeling that our everyday experience is ordinary, you know, and we are able to come out of it. So, as I said, the purpose of meditation is to somehow help us come out of that. And strangely or ironically, the only way to achieve, or hopefully, if you're able to achieve, is to do it by trying to do it consciously. And so we spend, I don't know, time, energy, dedication, heart, everything to do it consciously. But the real transformation, of course, takes place neither consciously or nor in an unconscious state. Meaning, of course, if it really happens in an unconscious state, then we can knock ourselves to unconscious with whatever, I don't know, whatever means, you know. Or probably in sleep, it can happen. But probably there's no other way than this way to try to do it somehow consciously. Consciously sort of to put up a sail and to see if you can catch anything. Consciously sort of to put up a net and to see if you can catch anything. In other words, it's a way to develop immense courage, one could say. And that's why we say Bodhisattva, or those with great courage. Courage, in terms of trying to do the impossible. For example, trying to accomplish meditation through conscious effort, which is actually impossible. It can never really happen 100% through conscious effort. It has to happen, well, in English word, the best word is naturally. And and the example, of course, is, as I said, those stages of life, those processes of life that cannot really be contained in a particular category. For example, it is the truth, of course, that as we speak, as we are sitting here, we are aging, of course, and if you take it in a sort of a negative way, we are, of course, falling ill, and we are coming closer and closer to death, of course. But we cannot put this in a box, yes? We cannot put this in a particular category. But it's happening, slowly but surely, sort of thing.